Let's talk about Dagga Private Clubs. And why talk about Dagga Private Clubs? Because nice people take drugs. And certainly in the eyes of most, cannabis remains a drug. But we're not here to talk about drugs. We're here to talk about our private use of cannabis within private spaces, which is our constitutional right here in South Africa. And as you might well know, around every single corner and every single little mall and all over the place, the length and breadth of South Africa, there are pot shops popping up all over the place. Some private, some not so private, some not private at all. And I think that it's important to remember that here in South Africa, the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act of 1991 is still 1992, is still very, very much in place. We're hoping that with the passing of the Cannabis for Private Purposes Bill, that the Drugs Act will be changed. But until such time as it changes, the only thing that we have to go by is our Constitutional Court judgment. And despite the Cannabis for Private Purposes Bill, we don't have regulations yet. And we know that trade in cannabis remains completely illegal in South Africa. So, lots of cannabis enthusiasts and entrepreneurs had this really, really bright idea that was inspired by the people in Spain and other parts of Europe to establish private clubs. It was completely logical, and it should, in the eyes of our legal team at least, be legal to use, possess, cultivate, and trade in cannabis within private spaces. And we know that private spaces is not only your home. Private spaces can be shared spaces too. So it's complicated. Here at Fields of Green for All, we are all about human rights, harm reduction, and drug policy reform. So human rights are human rights. We had the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in December. Harm reduction, that's why it's in the middle of the two. It's super important. It's the meat in the burger, because so many people and so many prohibitionists and government officials and the police and all of that are always talking about the harms of cannabis, because that evidence has never been properly ventilated in court, ever, anywhere in the world, where we have proved through our laws and our constitution these harms of cannabis. So what we want to do is reduce those harms, the harms of the stigma, the harms of prohibition, the harms of being locked up in a cage, and those perceived harms of cannabis itself. What about the children? Well, let's keep cannabis away from the children by keeping it to our adult use private spaces. So in an effort to promote harm reduction, so that we are playing into the hands of our detractors, you speak about harm, we speak about harm reduction. Fields of Green for All has devised their Dagga Private Clubs project. It was actually established in 2015 when Jules and I went to Barcelona and attended Spanibus for the first time and visited our first cannabis social club. It was formalized in 2019 by our dear friend Kenzie from Barcelona. He wrote this booklet for us, soon to be updated. And then formalized even more towards the end of last year when we decided, together with groups of other clubs, that Fields of Green for All would be well positioned to actually issue something like this. And this is the Certificate of Best Practice. So if you belong to our Dagga Private Clubs project, which costs you a mere 420 Rand a month, you will receive one of these certificates of best practice and one of these codes of conduct, which is basically outlining the best way to run your club in the broadest possible terms. So this is our effort as a civil society organization, as a non-profit company, to contribute to the advancement of this cannabis social club concept. We know that around the world it has been heavily promoted, researched, published about, particularly in Europe. Spain, of course, Barcelona is facing the mayor of Barcelona threatening to close down the cannabis social clubs. So Fields of Green for All signed on to a letter of support for ICEAs, one of our international allies. We know that in Switzerland, they are running pilot projects in 2 cities with private clubs. We know that in Germany, where they are somewhat backtracking about things to do with their regulations in Germany, but there has been lots of talk about cannabis private clubs, and we're not sure how their regulations are going to swing. We know in the amazing little island of Malta, that the Cannabis Association there has been formed in order to regulate the adult use cannabis market through private clubs. Barcelona is a bit sad. Switzerland is a bit promising, but then they're, of course, one of the most developed countries in the world. Malta is incredibly brave for doing this. And South Africa, well, we've got our constitutional rights. So if you'd like to know anything more about Dagga Private Clubs and about how your club could become a member and how your club could become active citizens, this is one of the first things that Jules and I learned all those years ago, that our work is about becoming active citizens and about serving our community. And that's really important. Serving one's community should be at the center of every single Dagga Private Club. So we look forward to hearing from you. Please let us know if you've got any questions. We're on all of the socials. And thank you for listening to this video.